Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Excited to be with you as always. I have an interesting show for you today. I have none other than Larry Johnson. So I'm going to bring him in and we'll get into our conversation immediately. But before I do this, remember to join me on Friday. As a matter of fact, the interview with Carl Za has been moved by one day till about Saturday. And on Sunday, I will be having a conversation with Professor Anna Malendog regarding the visit of the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, to the Philippines, where he is currently there, and before he travels also to Japan. So anyway, let's bring in Larry, and we're going to get into it right away. Hi, Larry.
Hey, David, I'm here.
Good to see you, as always. Excited to be here once again. And thank you for carving out time for us. You are very, very busy, especially now with managing the counter currents, which, by the way, guys, you need to, I'm going to put in a link for you. This Larry's channel here, check it out. You need to subscribe for it. Very interesting info. I just listened to one of his interviews yesterday with Alistair. If you know who Alistair is, you'll find it very interesting. So here is Larry's channel. Go ahead, guys, and sign up for or subscribe to his channel. So, and we'll talk further about all this. All right, Larry, we got a lot to cover. Where do I start? I would like to, just for the community to know, we're going to be dividing this interview into two parts. One, we're going to be talking about Russia, Ukraine, Europe, and so forth, and Donald Trump. And the other one, we're going to be talking about Iran, the Houthis, and the Middle East writ large. So I'm going to start by asking you, Larry, your assessment. Can Trump really pull the U.S. out of NATO? Is there possibility to this?
There's always a possibility, and the question is, should he? I would argue yes. The problem that Trump faces right now is that the NATO countries, the principal ones, particularly Germany, England, France, are doing everything in their power to sabotage peace negotiations, to sabotage Trump's efforts to try to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. And we're seeing that this week. And let me just add a side note. I just saw the U.S. annual intelligence assessment, threat assessment. Mm-hmm. And boy, talk about repeating and pushing Biden propaganda. This intelligence community document and talking about Russia and the threat it represents concludes that, oh boy, NATO's getting stronger. It's united, and they've added all these people. Boy, whoever wrote, the analysts that wrote that crap, they're not reading newspapers. They're not paying attention to what's in the news. What we're seeing is NATO is fragmenting. Mm-hmm. NATO is beginning to fall apart. And there is no consensus within NATO. So I think, Trump ought to just, make a clean break, but he's not going to do that yet, at least.
Yeah. So regarding his proposal to the Russians, and I'd like to highlight this one because it's very important. The American audience does not understand that the Russians are smart enough to know not to trust the Americans. So for what Mr. Trump's saying, I'm going to end the war on Ukraine in one phone call, whatever that, which is pathetic anyway. It becomes clear to me now that the Russians are not going to waver from their security demands. Would that be a fair assessment?
Oh, yes. No, it's taken the Russians a while to wake up to the fact that, we can't be trusted. When you look at the history of relationships between the United States and Russia, going back to 1990, the Western narrative, the U.S. narrative is that, boy, you can't trust Russia. They break agreements. You can't make an agreement with them. Okay, let's look at the facts. Who walked away from the anti-ballistic missile treaty? That was George W. Bush, not Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
Who walked away from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement? That was Donald Trump, not Vladimir Putin. Who has repeatedly imposed sanctions on the other country, going back to 1974, Jackson-Vanik Amendment? That would be the United States. First, we did the Jackson-Vanik Amendment, punishing the Soviet Union for not allowing Jews to emigrate. And then we followed that up with the Majinsky Act. This was a result of lobbying by a communist guy named Bill Browder. His father was the head of the Communist Party in the United States. Well, Browder hated Putin because Putin wasn't a communist. Putin wasn't embracing and following the communist doctrine. So, by God, can't have that. So Browder got the U.S. Congress to impose sanctions. Again, that was done by the West, and then followed up with the sanctions in the wake of the special military operation. How about ceasefires? Again, the ceasefires that were negotiated under Minsk I, Minsk II, sabotaged by Ukraine, and who began, despite the ceasefire, began shelling civilian areas in the Donbass, particularly Donetsk. And I heard this direct from Lavrov's mouth 3 weeks ago, that when the Russians met with the Ukrainians in Turkey, in Istanbul, in March of 2022, March 29th to be precise, that the document that the Russians ended up signing initially, the document outlining what the ceasefire agreement would be, that was brought to the table by the Ukrainians. So the Russians actually agreed to a Ukrainian deal. And who was it that came in and broke that? It was the United States with Great Britain. So the record here is one of, if you will, I liken it to the United States is the abuser in an abusive spouse relationship. We're the one showing up drunk. We're the one beating up the spouse. We're the one threatening the spouse with a knife, with a gun. We're the problem. And Russia is not. And I don't want to hear from people say, well, there's always two sides to a story. No, sorry, this is a very one-sided story with the United States constantly being the abuser. So that's why the Russians at this point, they don't trust us, and it's for good reason. So they're going to require very concrete demonstrations. They're not going to take our word for it. We can't say, trust us, man. We'll deliver. No. There's no more trust basis.
This leads me to address Europe. Europe into this, what's going on now, thinking that they are being sidelined, which they are anyway, because they are useless anyway.
Yeah.
This leads me to ask you the key question, given what just happened a few weeks ago with the meeting that took place in London, and of course with the idiots Macron and Starmer pushing for this narrative of, well, we're going to stand by Ukraine and so forth. Is Europe rather, Larry, in your opinion, capable militarily and politically to defend Ukraine?
Oh, hell, no, absolutely not. And that's the spectacle of, where they're pretending they're having a menage a trois between Starmer, Macron, and Zelensky. The Europeans are, I describe them as children playing dress up. They put on a cowboy outfit and say, oh, I'm a cowboy, I'm a rancher, or hey, I'm a doctor, or a policeman, or whatever. But it's pretend, it's dress up, because if it comes down to, okay, we've actually got to put troops on board transports and move them into Ukraine, they can't. They can move a few.
Yeah.
And then if they get there, they're going to get killed. Russia has made it very clear. You put your Europeans knowingly in here anymore, we're going to kill you. You know, this deviates a little bit, but we just had reports yesterday about 4 U.S. soldiers died in Lithuania, up on the border of Russia. And yet, it's not like they came out and said, oh, these 4 soldiers were driving in an armored personnel vehicle and they drove into a lake and they drowned. No, they said, oh, they found the vehicle in water but didn't find the bodies. I think what this is they're pretending that they were in Lithuania when they're probably actually killed in Kursk. And they're going to bring the bodies out, and I suspect the families won't even be allowed to see the bodies because they will have shown not death from drowning, but death from combat, an explosion or something. But getting back to the Europeans, they're going to be in the same boat. They're already suffering casualties. There are already significant reports of the Russians striking targets where there are British and French officers already in country. So it'd be one thing if in the 3 main countries in Europe, Germany, France, and England, if in each of those countries you had the ruling party with over 50% of the public support, but you don't have that. There is not a single political entity in any of those countries that is winning 50% support or more. They're down in the 30s, all of them.
Wow.
So, that's number one. Number two, their economies are in recession. They're not growing. And in Germany in particular, they're deindustrializing. They're losing capability. So they have neither the economic strength, the political strength, or the military strength to, even if they act together, to represent any kind of credible threat to Russia. But nonetheless, if they act on their words, Russia will hold them accountable and make them pay.
Well, actually, I want to go quickly to your point about having Western officers being targeted or killed there. I confirm that because I read it also through different sources from overseas. And to my knowledge, there were about 30 officers from Western countries that they were trainers, and so forth. They were targeted. So you're absolutely correct on that. Now, within this aspect, Larry, will it be fair to say, if we are to think on the big picture as to what Donald Trump is doing versus, sending his envoy and on all that, which is useless anyway. Will it be fair to say that the Russian president outmaneuvers Donald Trump?
I know he's Putin's not playing games, and I'm not suggesting that you're suggesting he's playing games, but
no, not at all. Not at all.
It's a different. Trump views negotiation as a game, his art of the deal. He's got a whole. I guess plan of action where he makes threats and he bullies up front, and then he can make some conciliatory gestures in private, but what he doesn't do is first sit down, listen to what the Russians are saying. What Putin said in June of 2024 when he spoke to the senior officials at the foreign ministry, he laid out what the terms are for an end to the war in Ukraine. The most important of those was that the Ukrainians have to immediately withdraw from the Russian Federation territories that have become incorporated into Russia newly. They used to be part of the Ukraine, and they were recognized by Russia as Ukrainian oblasts. To now they are part of Russia because they have had votes. The people voted to join Russia, and that is Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Well, all Trump has to do is listen to Putin on that score. He also listened about the need for elections, the need to reject any possibility of joining NATO, and the need to end all U.S. military and intelligence assistance. That is what, those are non-negotiable points for Putin. Trump and his team actually believe that they can finagle, they can, bamboozle Putin in some way and make him back off on some of those demands. No, they're non-negotiable. And that's what Trump fails to understand. So while they're hopeful that their negotiations can succeed, I think, frankly, the negotiations are probably not going to go anywhere, at least with respect to bringing a definitive end to the war in Ukraine. It is likely that Russia and the United States will, make some progress in normalizing their own relationship. But some of the agreements that the United States made with Russia and Riyadh on Monday are going to be impossible to implement, because one of them was the lifting of sanctions on agricultural products, particularly grains and fertilizer. Well, the main ones imposing those sanctions right now is Europe. And Europe, Macron came out yesterday, and said, hell no. No. We're not withdrawing our sanctions unless Russia gets completely out of Ukraine. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not.
So right there, they've sabotaged it. And then, Zelensky, we heard Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, say, oh, yeah, I think we got this deal. He was, it's a done deal. We'll sign the deal next week on the rare earth minerals with Ukraine. And then Zelensky in the last 24 hours said, basically, bovine manure, which is a polite way of saying BS. Yeah. He said, no. We haven't agreed on anything, and we're gonna, we haven't signed anything. In fact, I'm not even going to, So the Trump team's putting out like, everything's great, man. Those negotiations are going terrific. But the Europeans and the Ukrainians certainly aren't cooperating. And within all that, Russia has made its demands very clear. And that I asked Sergei Lavrov that very question. And he came back, provided a lengthy answer, but the bottom line was, no, we haven't changed at all. In fact, based on comments that Vladimir Putin made a week ago today before a group of industrialists, he made it clear. He says, look, Ukraine's got about 2 to 3 weeks to accept these deals that are on the table. If they don't accept those deals, then we're not going to stop until we've taken Odessa, we've secured the entire Black Sea coast, and we've secured Novorossiya, New Russia, which includes all land east of the Dnieper River and part of the land on the West Bank, which would include Kiev, because Kiev was a Russian city. That's where Russian Christianity in Russia was born.
Oh. Well, a lot of people in the West do not know this reality, Larry.
Right. That's the problem. Ignorance. We have no memory. Good God, they can't even remember. If you go back and say, who was president in 2009, they'd go, oh, geez, I don't remember.
No.
Whereas, the Russians, that's, I think, the one thing that really differentiates Russians from Americans. They remember the past. And like on May 9th, when they do the March of the Immortals, where the population comes out and marches in memory of their grandfather. I was going to say their fathers, but now, most of the people marching, it's not their fathers, it's their grandfathers or their great-grandfathers, their great-grandmothers who died or served in the Great Patriotic War, which we know as World War II.
Yeah.
They remember. It's personal. It touches almost every family in Russia, and they haven't forgotten. Whereas, look at the United States. we basically we don't pay attention to December 7th anymore. We certainly don't pay attention to May 5th, as what we've celebrated as Victory in Europe Day. It's that's 80 years ago. Good God, that's ancient history. And the majority of Americans didn't suffer any loss in that war. It was only a small percentage of Americans who had family members that paid the ultimate price.
Well, I remember, Larry, when I was teaching at the university, and something came up about World War I and II, but I focused on World War II, and I asked the questions: do you guys know who won World War II? And most of the students, would say, well, it was the United States and all that. I said, you have to understand how history has been manipulated. If it weren't for the Soviet Union, we won't even get involved in World War II to begin with, let alone how many the Russians have lost, over 25 million, up to 27 million people. So for you guys to understand, you need to understand this reality. And sadly, here in the West, history is manipulated. I know this for a fact.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned...
Let me just, on a side note there, while I was in Moscow, we toured, Judge Napolitano and I toured the Victory Museum, which is a special museum that they've constructed as a commemoration of World War II. It is the most magnificent exhibit I have ever seen. I've been through the various art galleries and exhibits of the Smithsonian, and all the aerospace museums, both of them. I've been through the Louvre, British War Museum. This thing is spectacular. It's so you walk. They've created. It's almost like the stage set for a World War II movie, where you've got you literally feel like you're in the midst of what the battle was, and they take you from the start of the war all the way to the very last room, which is you're in Berlin. You're on the steps of the Reichstag, and they've really gone to great lengths that they don't forget. And also, when I was afterwards, we went downstairs, and they have you can look names up this thing. And one of our guides is this young 24-year-old, I'll call it a girl, young woman. And I got talking to her and asked her about her family. And so she goes in and types up, and up pops her great grandfather and his picture and service record. I mean, it was incredibly moving. And we don't have anything like that in the States. Nothing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Smithsonian's and all that. It's not in comparison to all those. And I remember seeing some in Europe myself when I used to travel back then. You mentioned Lavrov, and I would like to share with the community. Guys, I'm going to share with you a clip from Larry's interview with Mr. Lavrov. But before I'll do that, Larry, I want to ask you a personal question, if I may.
Sure.
Your assessment about Mr. Lavrov, that you met him face to face, like we read about, I've been reading about Mr. Lavrov for years and years. We all know he's been around for a long time. What was your assessment meeting with the guy face to face? What kind of impression did he give you? Was he like that snobbish diplomat, or was he like very down to earth?
No, he's a regular guy that you'd enjoy sitting down, having a beer or having a vodka or drinking a glass of wine with. He is an unassuming person. He doesn't walk in and I'll compare him to, I used to be on CNN's Crossfire quite a bit.
I remember.
And I was on with Pat Buchanan several times.
Yeah.
And even though I'd been on with Pat Buchanan several times, I mean, literally sitting where I could touch him with my left arm. He was within arm's distance. There was one time when I was in the lobby of the CNN building, and here comes Pat. In fact, we had just been on a show together like 2 hours before. I go, "Hey, Pat." And he looks at me like, what insect are you? Who are you, and why are you talking to me? Okay.
Wow.
So I've been around people with that vibe. That ain't Lavrov. Lavrov is very personable. He's very funny. Does have a sense of humor, and he didn't come in with this attitude. Okay, I got a message to deliver, and you guys sit down, shut up, and listen. We had been asked by our hosts to prepare questions to submit questions in advance, which we did.
Yeah.
But we got in there; those questions went out the window. I didn't use mine.
Yeah.
Because the conversation was going in a different direction, and it was a good give and take. I mean, he would give comprehensive answers to what we asked, but that's just his nature. He thinks well on his feet, and it was just I came away very impressed with him I was impressed with him as a diplomat before, but then meeting him as a person. Why he's effective as probably the leading diplomat in the world today, because he's likable. He's not an unlikable person. He is, he doesn't pretend that you're not there. He looks you in the eye, he talks to you, and he listens.
Very interesting. Well, I wanted the community to hear this from you personally, because you had the opportunity. How many of us will get that opportunity? Not slim to none. Let's be honest about that. But let me, guys, I'm going to share with you a clip here. We'll take a listen quickly here, and I'll have Larry sort of comment on it, because there is one particular aspect into this clip, and we'll get into it once we take a listen here. So take a listen, guys. Okay.
I'm not sure I trust my own country. And I know that the Russian government is quite sincere in looking to pursue a diplomatic solution. What troubles me, and it's something that I continue to hear now from people in significant positions, just as the United States cynically developed a relationship with China in 1972 under Nixon, it was for the express purpose of going after then the Soviet Union, wanted to make sure that they split them apart. I have heard several people, and I know that this Elbridge Colby, who is going to be like the number 3 person in the Department of Defense, that they see China as the enemy, and they believe that they can split Russia from China, and again, use you. Not you personally, Mr. Minister, but the country as a wedge against China. Now, I've tried to say that's foolishness, because unlike the United States, the Russian government takes its agreements seriously and adheres to them. So how do you think, what will be Russia's approach in juggling this let's call it subterfuge by the United States to, on the one hand, offer you a hand of friendship, but at the same time, they have not released their desire to destroy your country and to also use you cynically against the Chinese?
Well, we have been through this, as you mentioned, in 1972, when Nixon wanted the relationship in this triangle to be like this. The relations between the US and China and the US and Russia, both must be better than the relations between Moscow and China.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm going to stop it right there, Larry, because I want to get your takes into all this. Now, you brought up a really interesting question, because I listened to the entire interview and specifically that, and I argued that point before when I wrote in my Russia book, that down the road, the US will be forced to try and to create that wedge between the Russians and the Chinese, because their friendship, their partnership was coming stronger.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, if you look at this latest intelligence assessment, threat assessment by the U.S. intelligence community, it reflects that, this I call it stupidly naive view that Russia's dependent upon China, that Russia's the junior partner, Chinese are dominant, that Russia's basically China's prison bitch, okay?
Yeah.
And Russia's got to wake up and realize that the West is its real friend, and then we can work together against those nasty Chinese. I mean, it is like I am so disgusted with this crap. It is a manufactured worldview. Yeah, because those Chinese and Russians, man, they are imperialist powers. If we don't stop them, they're going to take over the world. And then you go, okay, really? How many countries has China invaded in, let's just say, the last 50 years? Oh, they've had one foreign military adventure, and that was 1979. Other than that, they stay at home. They don't have 700 plus military bases around the world, unlike the United States.
Yeah.
Same can be said for Russia. Russia's not been out, the invasion of Afghanistan under the Soviet Union was equally sort of provoked by the West, as Zbigniew Brzezinski is admitted that before he died. And it was deliberately designed by us to try to entrap the Russians in a war of attrition that they couldn't extricate themselves from. And ultimately, they pulled out. Now, let's remember, they only lost 15,000 soldiers in that 10-year adventure, which is not, it's a lot, but it's nothing compares with what they've lost now. Yeah. They've lost 10 times that many in, two-thirds of the amount of time. And so Russia is also not an imperialist power, but here it is, the United States. We're the ones manipulating. We're the ones invading. We're the ones pushing war policies. And, what Lavrov is coming along, what he acknowledged there was, we recognize what the United States is doing. We understand it now. And we're not going to fall for that trap. We're not going to fall for that banana in the tailpipe trap, to quote Eddie Murphy. This is, this highlights, though, when you look at the intelligence assessment, they genuinely do not understand, nor do they really address in an intelligent manner what the nature of this relationship between Russia and China is. China needs the oil and gas that Russia produces in abundance. China actually needs some of the rare earth minerals that Russia produces. There's not a thing that Russia needs from China other than a market where they can sell their goods. And, if that doesn't put Russia in a position of being dependent upon them. Russia is needing workers. They do have a manpower shortage, and they can get some labor out of places like China and North Korea. But again, China is starting to deal with its own sort of population issues, despite being a 1.3 billion size country. Its replacement rate is dropping, but actually that is common across, let's call it, the developed world. It's not confined to China or to Russia. It's certainly happening throughout Europe, happening in the United States. So this is this failure to understand properly this relationship between China and Russia is, it's one of the real failings of U.S. policy.
Well, I couldn't agree more, Larry, because I'm also been convinced years and years, even during my days in Washington, that the lack of depth in understanding where the world is headed, where this relationship, especially between the Russians and the Chinese. And even back then I argued, and somebody rolled his eyes when I said that. I said, Mike, my word, down the road, you're going to see some strong partnership between China and Russia. And I wouldn't even be surprised it might even move to the level of a strategic. Oh, what are you talking about, Mr. O? And that's kind of like they couldn't understand. They couldn't. So I'm glad you clarified this for our audience to have a better understanding on this. Let's move on to our second part of the conversation here. And we're going to move, guys, into the Middle East or West Asia. And I'm going to start by the key question, Larry, given what the U.S. is doing right now in the Red Sea regarding the deployments of the Carl Vinsons and the USS Harry Truman and the bombing of the Houthis and so forth. So in your opinion, given your experience, Larry, would you see Yemen becoming a second Vietnam for the U.S.?
No. If Yemen is being used as a stepping stone to go to war with Iran.
Okay.
It's Yemen is a pretext in that regard. We couldn't even mobilize to attack to conquer Yemen. And what do I mean by conquering Yemen? If we continue to drop bombs from airplanes and launch cruise missiles and that kind of thing, that's not going to defeat them. That's not going to stop Yemen from launching its own missiles and from attacking ships in the Red Sea and from launching hypersonic missiles into Ben Gurion Airport and other parts of Israel. The only way to stop that, to fully get control, would be to invade Yemen and conquer it. Well, we'd need probably an army of at least 500,000 capable of deploying. That, ignoring our other commitments around the world, maybe upwards of 1 million men. Well, hell, right now our army actual strength is like 470,000 globally. So we're not even, from a manpower standpoint, we don't even have the resources in place to do that. So let's set that aside. That's just fanciful. It's not going to happen. The Trump team has made it clear, in my view, in the last few weeks, that they delivered an ultimatum to Iran, that Iran must get rid of any nuclear program, even its peaceful nuclear program, and cut off all support to Hamas and Hezbollah, or else they will be attacked by us. Now, my friend Ray McGovern, Ray believes that that's just posturing on the part of Trump, and that could be. But I am inclined to take Trump and Waltz and Rubio and Hegseth at their word for what they've said. Because even though in this U.S. intelligence assessment, the one sort of bright spot in an otherwise hot mess of a report is the presentation or the conclusion that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, does not have a nuclear weapon, and is not embarked on a program to build a nuclear weapon. Yet, despite that being the judgment of the intelligence community, you've got Donald Trump saying just 2 weeks ago, we're down to the short strokes. He's using sexual imagery there.
Yeah,
but we're in the short strokes, and we better come clean of not building that nuke or else. And in that regard, we don't just have the carrier strike group, the Harry S. Truman in the Red Sea. The Carl Vinson is apparently sailing out near in the Indian Ocean, headed towards the coast of Iran. You've got B-2 bombers and B-52 bombers that have been deployed to Diego Garcia, which is also in the Indian Ocean. So the United States is certainly making a show of force that we intend to do something militarily. And, it's predicated, let me emphasize this. The intelligence community is lying or mistakenly reporting on certain issues. One of those issues is the intelligence community is reporting that Iran's air defense system has been shredded, that it's non-existent, and that they're extremely vulnerable. One of the others, just as a sidelight, the Russia suffered 750,000 casualties. Most of those dead in the battle in Ukraine. Well, that's not true. That's a lie. But the point is, the intelligence community is providing false, misleading information to Trump and his team, and they're believing it. And when you believe something that's not true, but you act on it accordingly. So let me give you an example. If you're standing blindfolded on a roof, and I tell you, hey, David, it's just a 3-foot jump, so we're going to push you, and you're going to land in 3 feet, and you believe me, you trust me, you'll act on that, and you jump. Well, I was a little off. It wasn't 3 feet; it was 30 feet. The outcome's a little different. When you hit the ground, you're going to break some legs, maybe kill yourself. That's the situation the United States is in right now. If we go forward with this plan to attack Iran, because Iran has built up underground missile storage and launching the facilities. There's a great picture of it. You're showing it. That are beyond our reach to destroy. They have quite excellent air defense systems of their own that they've developed. Plus, they've got air defense systems from Russia. Plus, they've got Russian electronic warfare capabilities. Plus, and most importantly, they signed on January 17th a comprehensive strategic security agreement that covers all aspects, both military, economic, political, of their strategic relationship with Russia. Because Russia now views Iran as part of its economic future, because they're going to build a railway line that will run from the ports in southern Iran all the way up through Azerbaijan into Russia. And this will be a way to move cargo that comes out of Asia, and even if it comes out of Canada or the United States, more quickly running it into Russia via that line, as opposed to going through the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, the Mediterranean, the Bosphorus Sea. So Iran is in a new economic relationship with Russia, and Russia is going to protect that relationship. In fact, this is one of those areas where if the United States follows through on this kind of attack, it could destroy any possibility of normal relations with the United States. That Russia would break off contact with the United. We could potentially be at war with Russia over this.
I do believe that they will step in, and I know some. I remember when I mentioned that way back, and somebody put some comments like, "No, there is no way the Russians will risk it." I said, "No, they will move forward beyond what we could even imagine." And the Washington is not thinking in those terms of. I mean, we are looking at it right now, Larry, with the Houthis. I mean,
yeah.
The administration didn't expect that the Houthis is going to fire back. Now they've been targeting the Israeli airport, the Gurion airport, for the 6th time, while we are bombing, thinking we're going to intimidate them. Yeah. And that's to me where that short thinking comes in Washington, not thinking that Houthi is not going to back down. So if the Houthis couldn't back down, what makes us think that Iran, with all its, they do have some military capabilities, especially in the missile technology. And this leads me to the original question, Larry. Do you foresee the possibility of a strike against Iran?
Yes, I think. And if you ask Ray McGovern that question, he'd tell you no. So we have a polite disagreement on that particular issue. I think the Trump administration is so blinded by its ties to the Zionists in Israel that they have concluded that the only way they can deal with Iran is by trying to destroy it. And the irony here is, I believe that in doing that, if Trump does that, he will be sowing the seeds of the destruction of his own presidency, because it will turn into a military disaster, and Trump will be humiliated, apart from the United States being shown to be incapable of dominating a place like Iran. You know, we need to look back. This gets back to the issue of memory and forgetfulness in this country. I haven't forgotten our shock and awe in Iraq in 1991. That didn't exactly stop the ground fighting, and then what followed in 2003. And to recall that even though we entered Afghanistan, and had, which is about, Afghanistan's about the size of Ukraine, and we had every military advantage as the most modern, most expensive military in the world. We had tanks, vehicles, air supremacy, air control of the air, helicopters, and yet we couldn't defeat a bunch of mountain warriors who were carrying rifles and pistols, a few grenade launchers, and a few mortars. But we couldn't defeat them.
That's true.
Yeah, we could kill a lot of them, but we did not defeat them. We did not erase the threat. And after 20 years, we got run out of there. So, at some point, some humility ought to come in on the U.S. side. We recognize, you know what? I know we think we're really good, but there are certain battles, certain combat environments that we really don't succeed in without having to entertain significant losses. Now, could we have conquered Afghanistan? Yeah, maybe with a 2 million man force. But we weren't willing to make that kind of expenditure or that kind of sacrifice. We lost Vietnam, and people, we just didn't put enough troops in. Okay, we would have put in, let's say we would have put in the number of troops required to actually control everything on the ground. We still would have been taking casualties. So what we're looking at here is on paper talking about attacking Iran without thinking it through. Now, and this is where I have a real fundamental criticism of the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. I think that young man is so far over his head, he doesn't know what he's doing. And let's take this decision to attack Yemen. When Trump, I applauded Trump and his emissary Steve Witkoff, and they negotiated the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Because when they did that, it brought an end to the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. Because the Houthis said, oh, okay, that's the reason they've been launching attacks, in order to get Israel to stop the attacks on the Palestinians. So once that started, the Houthis said, hey, we're done. No more attacks, no more interference with shipping in the Red Sea. But then the Trump administration, for whatever reason, we still don't know why, they issued the first order, because I don't know how much you got into what's called JOPEs during your career in the Army, but the entire process starts with an alert order, where an order comes from, say, the president, from the president or the Secretary of Defense, alerting the relevant combat units that, hey, you might be going into action. And out of that, as a result of that alert order, then it's going to be followed by a warning order. Yeah, definitely, man, we're going to need to prepare for combat. Then those combatant commands, and this is under CENTCOM, well, they have to provide a concept of operations and complete with their course of action. And and provide a variety. We could do, here's option 1, here's option 2, here's option 3, here's the resources we need for this, the resources we need for that. And, lay out in detail what the operation will be. Once that they go to the command, the White House in particular signs off on it and goes, yeah, that's what we want to do. Then they issue a warning order and then a deployment order. And once the deployment order is up, then you move the assets out to be prepared to carry out the operation. And then you get the execution order. So there's a whole military bureaucracy process in this. So the attacks that were launched on March 15, the planning for that, this was in crisis planning, because under crisis planning, you can get some decisions made that can start assets moving within, 48 hours, sometimes 24 hours. No, this started at least a month in advance, but Yemen wasn't doing anything. Yemen hadn't started bombing or attacking ships, and they certainly weren't hitting Israel. They were observing the ceasefire. And that's why we've now got this signal gate, as they're calling it, the captured chat of Hegseth and the whole national security team, Mike Waltz. And to the credit of J.D. Vance and then Tulsi Gabbard's chief of staff, Joe Kent. Joe's who's an actual combat veteran, and whose wife has died in combat operations in Syria. So he understands the price. They both said, what's the urgency here? Why are we rushing into this? We can wait a month. No, we're going to go now. We're going to show Iran what we're doing. So this was all such a cynical action on the part of the United States. There was no justification for it. And Hegseth didn't think it through. And I don't think Trump was properly briefed upon what he was getting into. Because once those ships get into the Red Sea and have to start firing air defense missiles against inbound missiles from the Houthis and inbound drones, well, you run out of missiles. Yeah. There's a limited supply on board. I think it's 96 on each destroyer. And when you calculate that for every missile fired by the Houthis, a destroyer needs to fire 2. Well, do the math. If the Houthis fire 20 missiles, that means 40 of the 96 missiles have been fired off of one of the destroyers. They cannot stay into the Gulf for 3 weeks if the Houthis continue to attack them with regularity, which they are. And at some point they're going to withdraw, because the only way they can reload those tubes with missiles is they have to go to a port where there are cranes that can load the missiles on. But then there's another problem. Those Aegis missiles, the particular version is called an SM-3, I believe. Mm-hmm. There's a limited supply. In 2018, there were like only 660 of them. Wow. So it's not like there's, we've got some factory blazing away, turning them and turning out 20 or 30 a day. No, that's not happening. So again, this is a typical military. This is like, a teenage boy looking for just immediate gratification and not thinking through, what's the long-term implications of this. So, yeah, we shot our missiles off. Woohoo! Yeah. But, what? You mean we got to reload? You mean we got to find replacement missiles? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. That's the sign of a juvenile brain, undeveloped, not able to make strategic connections.
Yeah. Well, for sure, Larry, because there is, to me, at least with these actions that the U.S. is taking, to me, this is not strength. This is weakness and lack of thinking. Really, really serious thinking about this. This leads me to one point before I move to my last segment of this conversation here regarding the Houthis. To me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the Houthis have put now the Arab and Muslim leaders to shame. And specifically for the Middle East. When you look at, for example, the deployment of the aircraft carriers and so forth, how do you think those Arab incompetent leaders, especially in the Gulf state, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, how do you think they perceive now the Houthis standing to the US, and what might this lead to in case the US decided to attack Iran?
Clearly, the Houthis, and they just held a conference this week that brought around a number of international observers. I know that my friend Pepe Escobar was there. Another U.S. blogger, social media guy, Jackson Hinkle, he was there. The Houthis are reaching out, and you are correct. They're the only ones in the Arab Muslim world that are really standing up and fighting for the for the Palestinians. And this is not a recent phenomena for them. Remember, they've been attacked by the United States via its Saudi proxy going back for 11 years, and they've withstood Western-backed efforts to defeat them. There were covert actions being run against them out of Sudan and also out of Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And yet the Houthis have defeated it. And they've suffered hundreds of thousands of civilian casualties inflicted by these Western-backed efforts. They're not backing down. And our false belief in the superiority of air power without recognizing power has real limitations. Yeah, it can do some things well, but there are a lot of things it can't do. And defeating the Houthis, no. So if the United States goes forward with an attack on Iran, the potential for this to get out of control is significant, because the United States will not destroy Iran's ability to retaliate, and Iran and its retaliation will destroy U.S. military bases in Saudi Arabia, or in Qatar and Bahrain, in Saudi Arabia. If the U.S. also attacks oil infrastructure in Iran to damage the oil business, Iran in turn will destroy the Persian Gulf oil of the Saudis, set those fields on fire, and shut down the Straits of Hormuz. And let's not forget that since 2019, and so by my count, that's a full total of 7 years until today. If you go 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, every March since 2019, Russia, China, and Iran have held joint naval exercises there at the mouth of the Persian Gulf and into the Indian Ocean. Now, why do they do that? They're sending a message that they're cooperating and they're going to take steps to help defend Iran. And the West better take that into account. Yet, if you read this latest threat assessment, they don't give any attention to that or describe that even as a possibility. So Iran's actually holding quite a few cards that it can play. And the United States is not holding, even though we got Donald Trump in charge, he's not holding a Trump card.
It's becoming very, very clear. So, guys, by the way, if you have any question for Larry, I will answer only super sticker questions. Just prepare them, because we're going to do one last question here, and I'll see if you guys have any questions, because I don't want to hold up Larry for too long. He is busy. He also has a life to live. So we are just grateful, Larry, for you really to come on here, because I know how busy you are. And once again, Yeah, it means a lot to me, and you know me. I'm the type that you give sort of be grateful when people step forward, and you're one of those. I reach out to you, you respond within 24 hours, literally, if you are in the country. So I'm very, very
Yes.
grateful to that. So the last thing I want to ask you, Larry, before I answer the community questions and let you go, the visit of the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, to Philippines, Japan, Guam, and Hawaii. So I'm not going to talk about Hawaii. I'm not going to talk much about Guam, but I am interested in the Philippines and Japan. And even Japan, I won't worry about it much. I'm more interested in Philippines. What do you think the purpose of the visit at this time, given what's going on in the Philippines, in reference to the ICC illegal arrest of the former president, in relation to the escalation tensions between Philippines and China regarding South China Sea? Are we pushing China, the Philippines over the cliff?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, we've used the Philippines as a proxy against China. We've certainly encouraged them to, take, if you will, a hostile position vis-a-vis the Chinese. Now, the Chinese and the Filipinos, they've got some disputes over who owns which island.
Yeah.
And who's got navigation control over this portion of the sea. But when all is said and done, if it was just the Philippines versus the Chinese would win that. Now, with the Filipinos are relying upon the United States to give them the muscle to push back. So, once again, the Filipinos are being used as a proxy. You think these foreign countries, these little countries, and I put the Philippines in as a little country compared to something like China, the United States, or Russia. You think they'd realize, man, I call it sort of like they're like the fat girl in high school that the guys only want to date because they want to take advantage of her. She's not getting the dates because she's the prom queen, because she's the best looking girl in the school. Sorry, it's a crude divide, but it helps communicate what the nature of that relationship is.
Yeah.
And yet they're foolish enough to think, oh my God, they really love me. No, we don't have your best interest at heart at all. We're using you. You're just a tool. And you know what? When you get dirty, or when you get dull, or when we no longer use you, we'll discard you. You'll be, throw you away. That's what we do with tools. And in that regard, Pete Hegseth is there to try to convince the Filipinos, hey, will you continue being our sucker? Will you continue to be dumb enough to cast your lot with us? Because we'll give you all sorts of, we'll give you blankets and trinkets and, baubles. It's this has unfortunately been the sick part of U.S. foreign policy over the last 70 years. We keep, we will maliciously use other countries for our own immediate benefit. And once we're gratified, forget about them.
We disregard. You're absolutely spot on, Larry. Couldn't agree more. So let me take some questions from the community, not the community, those who got a super sticker here. Chili Pepper, thank you so much for your super sticker and support for the channel. Larry, what do you think of Brian Berlick views that Trump is implementing Project 2025 and EU taking on Russia in written in the book and parts of the plan?
Yeah, I don't think they're following a plan. I mean, I like Brian, and he's a smart, capable analyst.
Yeah.
But I, unlike Brian, I have worked directly at higher levels of government, seen how the decision making really takes place, and he's making an assumption that it's a rational process. People are following the plan. That they're sort of like airline pilots. If you've been around an airline pilot, when they go out, get on a plane to fly, man, they got a They go down check 1, check 2, check 3. These guys aren't like that.
Yeah.
They are embracing and doing things of their own accord. The split that's occurring right now between Europe and the United States, it's real. It's not. This is not contrived. This is not some drama, artificial drama.
Mhm.
And Trump really doesn't like Europe, and Trump really is wanting Europe to take more responsibility. And Trump is, I think, sincere about trying to get a deal with the Russians. That much I believe. But what I hope the Russians understand is Trump does not represent a majority view in the United States. The vast majority of Americans still hold a very jaundiced view of Russia. And they bought into the propaganda that Russia's our enemy and China's our enemy. And we got to be prepared to deal with them.
Next question from Rafael. Thank you, Rafael, for your continued support. Greatly appreciate you, man. Russia, the team needs a new coach. Putin was good to bring Russia up here, but his tactics are outdated. The West is taking advantage of his niceness now, like Gandhi was. Putin is a danger now. What do you think, Larry?
Yeah, I disagree. Putin, while it's true that the West mistakes patience and restraint as foolishness and weakness, Putin has also been, he's been very tough and very direct. It's like, go back and look at what he was saying on the eve of the start of the special military operation. He pulled the whole security team in and allowed it to be televised. And he was asking a lot of people some very direct, very tough questions. As I recall, Narishin, the head of the FSB, boy, he almost got humiliated in public because his answers weren't up to snuff. So Putin's not a weakling, but Putin is understanding he's not going to react emotionally. There's a tendency when we get, if you allow your anger to be driven by your emotions, you're going to make some very, very bad decisions. Whereas Putin has been, been doing it thoughtfully. So one of the criticisms, their offense is so slow. Why are they taking their time? Well, I had a chance to ask one of the Russian retired generals that very question. I was on a show hosted by Dmitry Simes, and General, I think it's Barishnik. I said, "Hey, why this slow pace?" And he says, "Because we're not going to needlessly expend the lives of our Russian soldiers. We're going to try to minimize casualties on that front, and we're going to minimize casualties of Russian civilians. Because if we go in and just without any regard, if we go in recklessly with ultimate violence, we'll be able to move quicker, but we're going to cause a lot of civilian casualties, and we'll have a much higher casualty rate among our soldiers. No need for that." So that's what he's doing.
That's very, very obviously. Yeah. Francis Tango, thank you so much for your super sticker and support. The question: if there is a war between Iran and the US, how good is Russia, and who will help Iran, and what will BRICS countries do in this scenario? In other words, will BRIC countries intervene also?
Russia will intervene on behalf of Iran if Iran is attacked in an unprovoked manner. When you read that comprehensive security agreement, Russia didn't provide an uncritical, limitless commitment to defend Iran, but they did say very specifically that they would provide all necessary aid and assistance to Iran in the event that it was attacked in violation of Article 51 of the UN Security Council, the UN Charter. So they made it very clear that an unprovoked attack against Iran is going to bring in Russian military and intelligence support. They left open the possibility that if Iran did something that took action and by its own action provoked an attack, then Russia was not obligated to respond. That's how that portion of the agreement's written. This will be backed up by China at a minimum, which is the most important one. It really doesn't matter what South Africa and Brazil say or do, because they don't have much clout to intervene one way or the other than to express outrage at the United States. The relationships between South Africa and the United States already are shaky and going to get worse in light of the recently announced ambassador, Trump's nominee for ambassador to South Africa, Brent Bozell, who's seen as this ardent Zionist, and the South Africans are likely going to refuse to accept his credentials. So that's why an attack by the United States, an unprovoked attack like this, could rapidly get out of hand and put us on the threshold of World War III.
Wow. Yeah, sad outcome. Very scary. Another one from Francis Tango. Once again, thank you, Francis. Question, Larry, if you interview Trump, what would you say?
I would start off by saying, why are you not requiring the intelligence community to provide you hard numbers and facts about Ukrainian losses? That'd be number one. Number two, but perhaps more importantly, is why are you willing to sacrifice U.S. national security for the cause of Zionism? I thought you'd put America first, not Zionists first.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. I'll have two more questions. One here from Rafael. Once again, appreciate you, man. Larry, I know you like movies. In Rocky 3, after he lost the fight, the old man told Rocky, "You have been civilized. Are Putin and Lavrov too civilized?"
No, look at what they've done. They've been civilized and yet have stripped NATO bare. Neither Germany, England, or France have any reserves of military supplies in their warehouses. They've been emptied. The United States can't even produce artillery shells to replace Ukraine's rate of use. We've been hollowed out in terms of HIMARS missiles, Patriot missiles.
Mm-hmm.
So, Russia, by being civilized, has actually defeated NATO. I think there's a lesson there.
For sure, for sure. And last question here we take from Army with Harmony. Thank you very much for your kind support. What if provocation is questionable?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I didn't understand the question either. So basically, the way I guess I understood it. What if we think about this provocation of the, I'm assuming it's talking about the Iranians here, the provocation of attack in Iran is questionable in itself, meaning the whole notion of the provocation itself.
Well, let me deal with the whole question of provocation. In fact, the book, you can see it behind me over my left shoulder.
Yeah, Provoked.
Scott Horton's book, Provoked. When you go through and read that, it's my gut reaction in reading it. I was getting madder with each page I read, because you realize how deceitful, devious, dishonest the United States has been, and where we've been given the chance almost multiple times to do the right thing, to choose a path that's going to promote peace, that's going to promote good relations with Russia. And every single time we choose the opposite path, every single time. And in choosing that opposite path, we choose actions deliberately that are going to provoke Russia, as it ultimately did. That, and when we talk about provoke, think of yourself, you're standing in a bar, and some loudmouth drunk comes up to you and go, "Hey, I don't like how you're looking at me," and they poke you in the chest. And you back away, say, "Friend, listen, hey, they keep poking you in the chest. They keep poking you in the chest. They're literally making physical contact with you, which is called battery. It's criminal battery. And finally, they back you into a corner where you no longer have any way to get out. They poke you one more time, and then you flatten their nose. You punch them. You knock them to the ground. And then they call the police and say that you've attacked them. We're that obnoxious drunk. Russia's the one that's flattening our nose, knocking us to the ground, because they've had enough. They've recognized, you've mistaken our desire for peace with weakness, and our desire to avoid war with fear. And neither are true. And so now we're going to pay it. The West is going to learn a hard lesson this way.
And it's about time for it. It's about its reality. So, guys, before we say goodbye here, I'm going to share with you a link to Larry Johnson's Substack. Make sure you sign up there. I read his stuff. I get his letters and so forth. I read them. So I read what's going on. It's very, very interesting platform for you to, if you want to educate yourself and be more informed. There is another link here also for his archives, all of them, but I highly recommend that you guys go and subscribe to his channel, the Countercurrents. Very interesting guest there. Yesterday, as I said, I was listening to Alistair, and I might extend an invitation for him if he would like to come over in this channel as well. So well, Larry, I can't thank you enough, man, for really carving out time for us here.
Yeah,
the community is always happy to have you. Yeah, an hour and 20 minutes. I don't know where it went. Well, I look forward to seeing you next time, Larry. I'm truly appreciate you. And
all right, my friend.
Yeah, it's an honor and privilege, really a privilege to share this stage with you here. And
I'm always grateful for you. Listening to.
No, of course. So you take care, Larry. All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed listening to Larry here. So very insightful guy and wonderful human being. So and very, anytime I reached out to him, literally within 24 hours, he'll let me know if he's available or not. So I appreciate that. So anyway, look forward to seeing you on Saturday for our community conversation with the presence of Dr. Stewart. Make sure you guys prepare your questions ahead of time, and because that's all it's our community, although we don't talk geopolitics. And on Sunday I will be and also on Saturday night I'll be having a conversation with Carl Za, and on Sunday I will be having a conversation at 8:30 a.m. with Professor Anna Malandak. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy it. As always, I look forward to seeing you. Remember, geopolitics impacts your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.